Hi, I'm Mary Lyons, the Wealth Woman.
I'm Eric Alexander with Benchmark Income Group.
Welcome to the Big Wealth Podcast. We are so excited to have our special guest with us today. We have Dane Espegard, who is the author of a newly released book called The Dream Machine, joining us today. First of all, just thank you for being on the show with us. It's like
Absolutely.
it's our own little celebrity.
It's my pleasure. I'm honored to be here.
Awesome. Well, I am particularly excited about this because I was fortunate enough to get to go through a workshop that you put on that was all about dreaming and really figuring out what you want from your life, both now and in the future. And that's something that we talk to our clients about all the time, right? We're big believers that money is just a tool that should be used to help you have a life that you can be excited about living both now and in the future. And it shouldn't be all about the future or all about today. There's a balance somewhere in there. And so your book and the workshops that you do are really just absolutely in alignment with the way we think. And so we're particularly excited to have you on board. So I'm going to lead in with a question that I think is hugely worth considering, which is, why is dreaming so important right now at this very moment in time?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. I get asked a lot recently also of why now for the book. And I think that the answer kind of is the same for both. But, we've just gone through and are still in, I guess, this pandemic that has been raging since, March of 20. And, in a certain way, the pandemic has been really powerful in terms of an agent of change for a lot of positive changes, the way that we do business, the way that we live our lives. And through that, there's been this probably only time in recent history that people have had this almost pause button hit, and this ability to kind of reevaluate everything from the people that they interact with, the way that they communicate with people, what do they want to leave their house for, what's necessary, what's not. And then it brings us to the job piece of, hey, I've been doing this for so long. Do I actually like this? Do I like working at home now? Do I want to do something else?
Right.
And I think there's also been this element of, as we've seen the negatives of the pandemic, and it's been an eye opener for people of, hey, if I'm going to make change within my life, sometimes we need that, a negative situation to be the impetus of change to say, hey, now or never. And so I think that dreaming is needed right now. The last year and a half has been one of the most uncertain times we've ever lived in, where it's not uncommon for somebody to feel lack of control and at the mercy of everything that's going on. And that hurts a lot of things, mental health and multitude of other things. And I think that when somebody has control over, what's next in their life, that brings a lot of power. The whole book is written off the premise of when there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. Yep. And I think that to me sums up why dreaming is more important right now than ever. We need that hope.
Yeah, well, I think in that you just said. Oh, yeah, sorry. Eric.
Well, and I think you stole the quote that I'd written down. I've got 9 pages of notes from when I went through that deal. But I think you called it the Great Resignation in that session that I got to sit through, and I think we're seeing it, right? Everybody's like, hey, what am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah,
which I think is really kind of cool.
I think you see it a lot. I mean, I've noticed even among my friends, and then we have this conversations with our clients too. Is and I'll reference a conversation I had at a happy hour last week. A friend of mine was like, I asked her how work was, and she was like, "It's fine. I don't know." And I'm like, "But you love what you do?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "And you like the people you work with?" And she says, "Yeah." And she's like, "I just really don't want to go into the office anymore. I've gotten spoiled because I can drop my kid, I can walk my kid to school, meet up with other moms and the carpool line or that are walking their kids to school, and then just walk to the neighborhood Starbucks, have a cup of coffee and come back." And she's like, "And I can be at my desk by 8:30 working, but I have the opportunity to go for a run in the morning or take the dog to the dog park or socialize with my friends. And that ability to start my day not being rushed." She's like, I don't want to give that up. And so I'm actively looking for another job.
Yeah.
And she's not unhappy with the job. She's unhappy with the way the job is impacting her life. And when I asked her, well, if you could script it, what would your life look like? And she was like, I don't know, I haven't really thought about that. And I think that,
Right.
you know, we get, when we're little, and I'd be curious to know your experience with this, because when we're little, I feel like all we do is dream, right? We
Yeah.
have these really active imaginations, and everyone tells us that everything is possible
Yeah.
and we can do whatever we want. And then, like, as soon as we become teenagers, I feel like
Yep.
it starts like, you need to start settling and be realistic. And, you know, that sense of dreaming almost gets like beaten out of you. And then I find there something happens in like the mid 30s to mid 40s where people wake up and they're like, okay, I have the house, the car, the kids, the spouse, you know, and like, I thought I would feel different when I got here, but my life seems like it's comfortable, but I don't know that people describe themselves as happy, right? They're not enthusiastically going from day to day.
And-
it's more,
Yeah, and I would even describe it as the word alive, right?
Yep.
That's, in other words,
Yep,
they're
that's the
happy,
right
but
word.
are they alive? Where it's, you know, they're excited, they wake up with vigor to say, I don't know what today is going to be like. You know, it's going to be, it could be amazing, it could be, you know, could be challenging, but up for that excitement, I think, is so important. And you're right, it's. I have a 5-year-old and 3-year-old, and it is, you know, dreaming is whether or not it's in our vocabulary, which it is, we talk about all the time. You know, kids have this wild imagination, which is so great. And then it's, you know, beaten out of them through the words of be realistic. You got to pick a major that's going to get you something secure. And that comes from a you know, place that's trying to protect that person. But unless you were born into a family that was wildly successful, nothing exciting is realistic, right? Those two things are combative towards each other. And so it's just, the system that we have is really tough for somebody to grow up and continue to dream all the way through.
Because it seems so far out, right?
It does, right? So talk to me about, I mean, I think I would almost describe you as like obsessed with the idea of dreaming, right? And in the best possible way, because it creates that feeling of living. Where did this come from, right? Like, this is not normal. Let's be honest, it's not normal. Where did it come from?
Well, so I think it's an interesting question. I don't think it came from one place. You know, obviously, nature, nurture, there's a huge conversation with that. My parents were fantastic, especially my mom, in keeping the dreaming going. If anything is possible, I can think of a lot of conversations where her and I would talk about things I'd want to do, and she'd be very, you know, engaging and uplifting with that stuff. I can remember my mom saying, "You're talented to do whatever you want," right? And what that turned into, we never really knew what it was going to be, but I remember those conversations on a regular basis.
Right.
Then I found Vector Marketing, Cutco Cutlery, and it's a direct sales organization. It was my first job out of high school, and they're really big. The company's really big on personal growth. And so I was introduced at 18, 19, 20 years old, some very, you know, formidable years in terms of my growth, to Tony Robbins, to, you know, just personal growth as an industry. And I remember having the platform to practice it with sales and goals and being rejected and getting back up again. And then hearing the conversation of, you can do it, anything's possible, you know, those two things in my late teens, early 20s. And then I heard a speaker, Matthew Kelly, on a stage in 2007 give a speech on dreams, and we made our first dreams list. And so I'd say that's kind of that would be the full story. And so I made my first dreams list, and it kind of got me back to, you know, I was 23, so it's not like I had gone a long time of not dreaming. And I think dreaming is like a muscle. I think it's, you know, I've taken people through this that haven't dreamed clearly for 20 or 30 years, and they're really struggling to get things on paper. And when I do it with an 18, 19-year-old, they're just, you know, it's like there's smoke coming out of their pen. They're going so fast. And so, so for me, I think it kind of, the personal growth aspect, finding out when I was 18, 19 made a difference. And then that conversation with Matthew Kelly from stage, that was kind of put the feather in the cap of, okay, here we go. And I'm onto something here for this.
Well, and you said something in the seminar that I got to go through, and you said there's a difference between dreams and goals. And I remember reading a book by Scott Adams, the guy that did Dilbert, And it was
Yeah.
basically how to suck at life and win. I forget what the actual name of the book, but it was actually something like that, because it's Dilbert, right? But he was like, goals are stupid, goals are for idiots, kind of thing, right? And I think his sort of idea was, you're always sort of mildly annoyed, like you're always sort of in this huge deficit and this huge deprivation until you get to the thing, and then it's like, okay, well, now what?
Yep.
Right? And I think you talked about that as far as, well, the best day the best time, the most healthy you've ever been was your wedding day, kind of thing. So talk to me a little bit about sort of dreams versus goals.
Yeah, so I think goals are important in life because it gives us something to work towards, right? Sure. And we've all heard the saying before, it's not accomplishing the goal, it's who we become in the process, right? And so the value isn't accomplishing it. And a lot of times our biggest accomplishments, they were great, but the memories come from everything that led up to that. And, I use the example of the wedding day thing where somebody says, hey, here's my wedding date. And all of a sudden we get into the best shape of our lives because we've been thinking about it. We can see it vividly of us on the, up front in front of our families, and the pictures are going to live on and on. And then the second that day is over, we don't have the next thing. And so what happens is all of a sudden we let ourselves go. We're not as strict on the diet or working out or whatever. And that's just the health example. But I saw for myself in my mid-20s, as I was really grinding at work and I was trying to make it at work and hit all these goals, I was doing the professional growth and the personal growth aspect, but all of the accomplishments were all work related. And it was almost every time I hit one, it was a little fleeting. Like it was, okay, well, I know I should be growing, but this stuff. And so for me, I hit kind of a lull. And then once I recognized and I got back to my dreams list and kind of instituted as a culture within our team, I was probably 28 then. That's when I really dove in full out with this thing. And I've been doing it since then. And for that, what I found for me is there was always something coming up in my calendar. So there was never this lull, whether it was a work thing or a physical thing or a relationship thing or a trip that was coming up. And if I can always have my deck stacked like that or my calendar stacked, well, that's just now I'm just a different person as opposed to a season of the year. And that to me was a really big change for me to kind of be regular with the way that I'm showing up and be consistent.
And is that dreams pipeline idea? Like you've always got something on the next side of that, right?
It's the big menu, right? It's making this really big menu. The other distinction that I'll make for dreams and goals are I think goals are powerful. I've been helping in my role thousands of people set goals for the last 15 years. The tough thing with that is we've all been in a situation where when we're left to pick our own goal, we pick something we know is attainable, right? Because subconsciously we want to hit it. And that's not the idea of dreams is, hey, get rid of that. It's supposed to be ungrounded. Anything where possible. Doesn't matter about finances, travel restrictions that we're experiencing. Who cares? None of that matters. Make the big list, because what happens, I just read this recently in the book Who Not How from Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And it was talking about how, and I liked this definition, self-confidence is created when we make progress towards previously unattainable goals.
Right.
And the idea of we need the big goals so it stretches us. And even if we accomplish a fraction of that, we're more prepared for the next thing. And that's how we develop that confidence. So I think that falls in line with the whole dreams concept.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to what you just said, kind of in your personal journey, because a lot of what you said hit, right? Like it resonates, because I remember doing a lot of these same things. And, I spend so much time talking to my clients about dreaming, but I don't always do it myself, right? I mean, it's cobbler's kids and all that, right? So this idea of doing all the development on the work side of things. I mean, I like what you're talking about in your late 20s and maybe even some of your 30s, being really focused on that side of things. And I can remember having conversations with personal coaches, business coaches, friends, and they're like, yeah, all that's great. Here, you keep talking about your business. What about you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? But it was all about the professional side of things, not about what's happening in my personal life. And as my kids are 10 and 7 now, it's interesting, like the work thing is still important, but now the rest of it is more important than I ever thought it would be, because I know that my time with my kids is fleeting. And you mentioned in a previous conversation that when you came up with the dream machine and the original focus of the dreaming, was really centered just around the work side of things. And then you kind of spread it. Can you talk a little bit about what you were doing on the work side and then how it spread over?
And I think it is an important distinction. So I brought this to my relationship selfishly out of growing my business. So at the time when I did this, my wife and I were dating at that time, and I had an opportunity to make another move within the organization of Cutco. And so I was very conscious about what culture do I want? And I settled back on a culture of living a life of your dreams. I was like, that's exciting to me. If I can institute this from day one, this is something that will live on for a long time. And I also knew just from my own kind of personal development that if I want an idea to stick, the leader has to live it out loud. Right. And so for me, I said, I've got to go all in on this. So I took it to my girlfriend at the time and I said, hey, I need you to make your dreams list. I'm going to go back through mine. We're going to get connected here at the end of the year, and we're going to plan out 2013. That was the year. We're going to plan out 2013 with our dreams into the calendar so we know they happen. And my original plan at work was, I'm just going to help people make their list. And then I am going to actively accomplish things on my dreams list. And I'm just going to do it out loud in front of my team. And I'll have some other people that, hey, it's acceptable to take vacations. It's on your dreams list. And what I found, it did a couple of things. One, it gave me the freedom to actually talk publicly about things that I was doing. And I think sometimes when you're in a leadership role, we dull that because we know that somebody on our team maybe doesn't have the same financial or flexibility, right, to be able to accomplish those things. And so we want to get to this place to live this great life, but then we don't live it out loud, which is actually a disservice to our people. Because they want to be developed with and by somebody who's living a life that they would want to live.
Right.
And so for me, by doing that, it was giving me freedom to live more out loud. And through the years of doing that, I noticed a shift for me also, and this wasn't the intention, that I was accomplishing so much more out of work, which was bringing more energy to work. So I was no longer waking up and being like, I got to go to work. I get to go to work. And it's connected to these other 5 dreams that I have coming up in the next 6 months. So it's kind of that balance of live to work, work to live. And I think a lot of people naturally hit that. Not everybody, but I think that we get to a place once we have kids and everything else where we start to just recognize like, oh, there's a lot more than me just achieving at work. But I think the dreams concept allows the focus to be earlier on that. And if I can go on one more moment for this, I work with a lot of 18 to 22-year-olds. And I see them stress so much on, I have to find my career. It's supposed to be my passion. That is looking for like a needle in a haystack, especially when you're 18, 19 years old. There's some people that never find their passion, and then they get into a job and that's just what they end up doing. And I think that what I've seen people do is by pursuing this menu of dreams that they've created, they find their passion fast, because they're living all these awesome experiences. And then through that, it also gives them freedom to say, my job doesn't have to be my passion. It might end up being that, but if I'm utilizing my work as a vehicle to live the life of my dreams, that's pretty exciting by itself. So those are the things I think kind of matter with that switch.
Well, and the job comes and goes, right? I mean, especially if you're an 18-year-old or 19-year-old.
I think passion comes and goes, like in and of itself, right? I mean, there's a difference between passion and purpose, right? I mean, passion is a feeling. Purpose, to me, is so much more than that.
It's like a calling.
Right. But I think this idea of I'm supposed to know my purpose at 18, like you're not done growing yet. The part of your brain that even processes emotions doesn't fully mature till you're 25, right? And I would argue there are many people it never matures on, right?
That's
but I think you can't possibly figure out what your purpose is, right? And it may not be the job. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to my husband about this, because for me, like, I love my job, love it. Like it gives me a huge sense of fulfillment, because I get to have big impacts on people's lives. And that is hugely motivating to me. His job, he is amazing at, but if you asked him what's your purpose, his answer would be to be a good dad to the kids, right? And to be a good spouse to you. That is his thing. And I'm always like, like I have to take a minute and be like, is my purpose wrong? Should I be more focused on responsibilities? But
it's a scorecard problem. It's not your scorecard.
Right. But if you don't spend time thinking about the dreams, how do you know what your scorecard is?
Right.
Exactly.
Because this is a conversation that I had with a woman who owns the Executive Women's Forum here in Dallas. And at some point we were talking about what I was trying to do, and it was very heavy on the career side of things. And she just looked at me and she said, "Yeah, you're living your life on someone else's scorecard. Do you even know what your scorecard looks like?" And I had this moment where I was like, no. Huge, like,
Yeah.
wow, what an intense question. And what you're talking about with the dreams is so uniquely personal that through those experiences, I think you can figure out your scorecard. Right. I mean, it's kind of along what you were saying, is that people figure it out faster.
Yep. In our experiences, that they change what we value. And all of a sudden somebody starts to travel, and travel may be something that's on their scorecard, or it might be something that, hey, that's great, but I really like the community and exactly where I'm at, and I don't need that, but people have to go through those experiences before they actually have opinions that are based in truth.
Right. Well, I think that's the problem with goals. Back to your original point, is if I'm looking at key performance indicators or whatever the KPIs are, right, that's someone else's scorecard. I'm never excited about achieving that goal, because that's somebody else's goal sort of foisted upon me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that, right? Or that doesn't get me up in the morning. I'm not, that's not getting me out of bed,
It's not
right?
your why.
It's not my why, right? It's somebody else's why, and they're holding my paycheck hostage to make sure I get that why done. But
I just want to be very clear that you're not talking about me right now. Because
No. Well, Wells Fargo right now is my why, right? I got to pay for the mortgage, get it done, right? But no, I think but in previous jobs, especially in W-2 gigs, right? That's kind of how it works. I mean, they're saying, hey, you have this paycheck here, but you've got to do these things. That may not be your why, your passion, your purpose. It's part of the job just to get it done.
And I think that with this, like, one of the things I've noticed when in a workplace, being able to bring this to the workplace, is I have objectives for our team, right? Just like any business owner is going to have, like, hey, we have to have these KPIs so that the business continues to grow, is profitable, and everybody has jobs.
Right.
What this allows us to do, though, if I know this employee, this team member's dreams list, and I go through with them and say, hey, what are the dreams on your list that you want to accomplish in Q1 this next year? And we have that conversation first, and then it's, hey, let's talk about the KPIs and your performance at work, and how that's linked to you living this dream. Now all of a sudden, it's so much deeper than just, I need you to do this because it's your job. It goes back to, hey, no, you've got some skin in the game here, because this thing that you've self-selected that you're putting on the line for this next quarter.
Yeah, when there's power in the present, right? Or when there's hope in the future.
It is, and it's an alignment of vision, right? If we do these things together, everybody wins in this scenario, but you know what winning looks like. And I think that, this is one of those areas I think that I hope changes. And I've seen it change within our team, especially over the pandemic, because we did a lot to make sure there was personal connection when we were all remote for a while. Is that if you don't know people at a personal level, and you're spending this much time with them, I just feel like, if you're spending 40 hours or more at work, and you don't know what's important to the people that are on your team, something is wrong.
And you're just coexisting at that point. And also, you would have no idea once they start looking for a job elsewhere, like you mentioned your friend, right? And I think it's like, how much is that worth it to me as a business owner to retain that person? Well, we would always say it's a lot once we lose them. Right. But beforehand, and so when I think about the dream stuff, it's, I've seen teams that are kind of similar to what you're describing, Mary, where people are kind of working near each other, but they don't necessarily know each other super well, that go through this exercise. And when we do it, like the full retreat, where they actually will do the sharing and stealing together, they get to find out stuff about their coworkers that sometimes their spouses don't even know about them, because they didn't put it on a list before we went through the exercise. And now they're sharing these things of, I want to be a better husband and wife, and I want to exhibit more patience with my kid. Like, they're getting the real raw, this is that person I'm working next to. And so there's no more just generic, hey, how was your weekend? How are the kids? Right? But they actually can dig deep fast, which I really love.
Yeah, but how many times do you have that with a spouse? right? I mean, the reason that the reason that employees leave is because they don't feel engaged with, you don't quit jobs, you quit bosses, right? Is sort of the old adage. And I mean, think about that with spouses, right? We've got the marriage part out of the way, we've checked that box, and we're driving on, and then I got to go get kids to work or kids to school, and I got to get my job.
At some point.
It's all logistics, and we stop that. I think to your brilliant point earlier is we stop that dreaming with each other. Okay, what's really important? What are we working towards?
Well, I mean, Mike and I have been married for 15 years, and when we went through the workshop and wrote down what the dreams were, I think both of us were really surprised by some of the things that were on there. And part of me was excited to get to have the conversations, and the other part of me was like, holy smokes, like how are we going through our life not talking about this? But I think you have that conversation while you're dating and when you're getting married, and then you're like, well, I already know the answer, so you don't have the conversation again. But dreams evolve, right? Yeah,
dreams evolve. And also, it's not, I wouldn't even say like that pressure goes on both people. In other words, when I think about, when marriage and life happens and kids happen, it's like, well, like all this stuff is put on us and our obligations grow through the roof. So the amount of time that I spend to say, okay, I need to do these things to make sure I'm alive, that just takes a really big back seat. And so the dreaming aspect, by you and your husband going through this together, it gives him the opportunity to just say, relationship aside, like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that I had always wanted to do, I just haven't done yet, and we have the time for it, we just don't make them priorities. And so just making the list brings it back to focus to say, God, I told myself I was going to do all these things. It's been like 10 years since we've had kids. There's no reason I couldn't have done some of these things and carved out the time for it. So with my wife and I, our lists look totally different. Like there's not a lot of similarities between a lot of the stuff that we're interested in, but that's okay. And it allows us to still have a really vibrant, healthy, alive marriage because we're supporting each other. And that's what, I didn't want to marry somebody who was the exact same as me.
No.
Right? I wanted to be with somebody that was going to challenge me and support me so that I could also do the same for them.
Right. And do you find that helps you with gift giving and Christmas and birthdays and Valentine's, of like, man, that's, well, because I keep thinking, my wife and I have this sort of running joke, and we're like, I don't know what you want. Like, I have no idea. We have everything we need. What do you want for your birthday? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just, this is kind of like ongoing sort of drama, right? Or sort of meh discussion, right?
I joke around and say I never miss. And the reason I never miss is I have a cheat sheet. If I have somebody's dreams list, I don't need to ask them what they want. I can, so the anticipation of the surprise is there, and you're able to just pick something that is going to hit, unless it's an outdated list. And they are living lists. Like there are things on my list that I'm like, I'm not interested in that anymore.
I don't want that anymore.
But for the most part, it's great.
Or maybe stuff you've tried and you're like, I don't want to do that again. Like I'm glad I did it once, but I'm out.
Not again.
There's a lot of things on my list that I just want to try and or do, but don't necessarily need to do again, right?
So I want to hear of all the things that have made it onto your list that you've had the chance to do. What has your favorite been? Do you have a favorite? Like a clear, this was the best thing.
Well, so, out of recency bias, I would say an experience one this last summer. I'm a really big sports fan, and the stars kind of have to align for some of my sports ones to happen, such as I want to see the Green Bay Packers win a Super Bowl. A lot has to, it's not just something I can book and do. Milwaukee Bucks winning the NBA championship was on my list. And so Game 6 happened to be in Milwaukee. My buddy happened to have tickets, and so everything aligned, and I got to experience that and go on the court after the game. And so that was, and so that was one. And I would also say the fact that this dialogue is within our marriage is what made that actually even better. And the reason is I actually tried not to go. It's on my dreams list. Game 6 was in the middle of a week. It was a Tuesday night. My book was like almost out. So there was a lot of last second things. Work was busy. We've got 2 little girls. Like there was just chaos all over. And my wife and I have been talking about it, and I said, I'm not going to go. It's too much. And she said, what are you talking about? You have to go. It's on your dreams list. Are they going to make it next year? And I'm like, well, I don't, I can't answer that. And she's like, you need to go. So I went, and the part that's different, everybody who's in a marriage can understand this. I've been at plenty of sporting events where things that I've chosen to go to and I've had guilt in the back of my mind of I've left my wife with all this going on. I had no guilt. I was there fully present, fully enjoying this, and knowing that when I got home, there wasn't any tough conversations. It was going to be all, hey, I'm so glad you did that. And I could say to her, thank you so much for supporting that. And it was such a cool experience that I would say even up to that point, I haven't had that was a very unique experience because of that.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's a permission because it's a priority, right?
Totally.
And just her knowing that too, probably it was probably easier for her to be generous in that situation because she knew it was important enough that it got onto your list, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how often do you guys do that then? How not the go to the Bucks game, that's sort of a once in a lifetime deal, but how often do you guys sort of recenter on the dreams? Like, okay, let's do that session again.
Twice a year we'll go through it. Our big one is always at the end of the year. So we'll always get time at the very end of the year, and we do what I think is, for us, this works really well. We do our year-end review, and just like you would with somebody on your team. So we sit down, no kids, we go somewhere cool, and we start with our iPhones, and we actually go through our camera roll because so many photos get captured there and just die on your phone. Yep. And we have notebooks, and we write down all of the things that we loved about the year. And then we go through our Google calendars and we do the exact same thing. So we're pulling out the highlights, which allows us to sit there and be in it's kind of like framing the next part. So we're feeling great, full of love, in abundance, and saying, wow, what a year that we just had. And then we go into, okay, this next year, what are the dreams on your list? What are the dreams on my list that we want to get done? And some of them we book right there on the spot. And then we also look at what we did last year that made it great. So sometimes it's just a random, we had a Saturday barbecue with these couples. We need to do that again, right? It wasn't this big ordeal, but it was such a great Saturday, right? Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that highlights. That's a great idea.
And then when you're thinking about the next year, how do you pick what you plan onto the calendar?
So we each will go through and select 5 to 10 that are feasible. And then we kind of have open discussion when it comes to it. And, finances are a part of this. Sure. Some make sense this year, some don't. And what I like about it is, if anything, us going after these dreams have only given us more motivation to earn and be smart with our finances, because a lot of the big ones that we have require more. And so we'll go through and see what lines up. We like to do a lot of piggyback, like my travel category is huge. So is my wife's. So we'll do a lot of piggyback trips type stuff. So in other words, if we know we're going somewhere, it's, hey, is there another area or something that's on our list that's near there that we can knock off 2 or 3 in one trip, or on the way back, or, a deviation. Or if I have a meeting somewhere, it's like, hey, that's near this, and that was on my list. I'm going to take an extra 2 days to do that. So we look for a lot of, kind of piggyback moments. But then there's also bigger ones. Like for me, health is a really big one for this coming year. And so I just hired a health coach. I'm spending a lot of money on it. I'm doing a lot of things that are inconvenient for my wife, and in terms of food and all that kind of stuff at home. And she's in full support because she knows kind of that's my main initiative for my next year. Mm-hmm. And I just started that a month ago, but that would normally be something that we're deciding at the end of our year.
So Dane, if somebody is looking at this and like, man, I love these ideas, but I don't really know where to start. Mm-hmm. What do you recommend? And even more specifically, what do you offer? So if someone's listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is exactly what I need right now. How can they find you? How can you help them?
Yeah.
How do you make this approachable?
First, there's a book.
There is a book. And you can just, thedreammachinebook.com is where you can get the book, or my website, or Amazon, or whatever. My website is just my name, daneespegard.com. This started off as a business application for teams. And so I do custom workshops for teams, for mastermind groups, which is how we got connected, Mary, through a friend of mine's mastermind. And so I do a lot of that kind of introduces the topic. I just did one this last weekend for a group of mortgage people in the mortgage industry. And then, so I do a lot of custom things in the workspace. As the book came out and I started talking about this, I got asked that question a lot. Well, what if I just wanted to make my list? How do I do that? And I didn't have an answer for it at first, because I was like, well, your company, I guess, has to hire me, because that's kind of the only way that we were doing it. So I just started doing some kind of like Dreams Workshop Light edition, if you will, which is kind of what Eric went through on a Saturday. I don't know when this episode will come out.
Probably the first week of December.
Okay, so that December 4th is the next one that I have. I don't know if that's in line or not, but on December 4th on Saturday morning, I'm going to do one from 10 to 1. And we did that as a book launch initiative at first, and now we're doing that probably on an every 2-month basis. So, and we'll sell tickets to those. They're not much. It's on my website as well at daneespegard.com. So if somebody just goes to that, they can see the dates of what the upcoming ones are. But I just felt like there was too many people asking, how do I go through a workshop even if my business doesn't hire you? And so we're providing that as a starting point.
Yeah, and that workshop was great, especially that idea of sort of the dream storming, I think is what you called it, sort of that, so that rapid fire, just as much as you can write down, as fast as you can get it out. But then that sharing and stealing was really, really cool, because it gave a sense of like, oh, I didn't think about that. That's a great idea, right? And it's sort of getting to sort of co-opt someone else's dream a little bit, but it's like, yeah, I'm going to add that in.
And I get to steal the most because I get to participate in all of them. So I'm popping around. I always add more. It's great.
That's wonderful. And I found doing this too with my family, seeing what made it onto my kids list was fascinating. I mean, there was, my youngest wants to go to Ohio. I'm like, what do you want to do in Ohio? Is there like a specific thing? But I mean, he's very
Is it Cooperstown or something? I don't know. What's in Ohio?
I don't even know, but he's very fixated on that. And, we, during COVID, we took an RV trip it was supposed to be 3 weeks. We made it about 2. And then we're like, oh, okay, this may be a bit much.
This is good.
I mean, in fairness, the place that we rented our RV from was great, but the RV was very old and had some issues, and looked really great in pictures, not so much on the road. And so, but my daughter, who's 10 now, that is the trip that seems to be the most impactful for her, because her love language is quality time, and that was like all of us together, 24/7 in a very small space all day long. I mean, it was us in the RV with 2 80-pound puppies, right? So it was an intense trip, but that's what she wants to do again. Like, I think that or Hawaii, right? Yeah. And so it's, I don't know, to me, it gives you an opportunity to get to know your family or your coworkers or your employees in a completely different and more meaningful way. And I think, especially if you look at what's happened over the past 18 to 20 months, that's what we've been lacking, is that connection. Yeah. And I think when you feel alive and you're doing interesting things, that connection is so much easier, because you're excited as opposed to apathetic, right? And then you want that connection, I think, in a deeper way. Plus, you have interesting things to talk about, so that probably helps.
So much so.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say one thing with that. The other thing that a kid gets that's a skill is they learn how to solve problems. And what I mean by that is, a dream is just a positive problem. Hey, I want to go to Ohio, but I don't have money. I don't know how to get there. Like, as a 7-year-old, I don't know how to do all this. And so what we teach kids, or even at work, it's a regular occurrence of solving a problem. And then when an actual problem comes up, the individual is so used to just figuring out, well, who do I know that can help me with this? And so what I love about it is it's a constant problem solving exercise with a really positive slant to it.
Yeah, the good news there is Connor's going to learn how to hotwire a Porsche. So, like, these are all life skills, right? It's like
that's not where I thought
we're
that was
going to Ohio. But I think we've had that apathetic. I mean, I think the last 2 years, year and a half, whatever it's been, has been sort of the wake-up call. But I think we've been apathetic for a long time. I mean, just to be a little bit morbid about it. But like, I think we've just it kind of gets papered over because we're busy. And we're like, I'll do that stuff later. But I think the sort of gift of COVID, if there is such a thing, is that wait a minute. And you said at the beginning of that pause, like, okay, wait a minute. What's really, really, really important? Yeah. And how do I make sure that on the other end of this, life is different?
Well, and I think just even giving yourself something to look forward to on a regular basis is so incredibly healthy. Because I think so much of that apathy comes from if you're just rinse and repeat through your life,
Yep.
there's no new experiences. There's nothing that you're looking forward to,
Right.
right? And then you get in that sort of mode of like, what's the point of doing all these things again?
Right. It's
Right? Like,
Groundhog Day.
why am I
Right.
working so hard, or whatever it is, if you aren't doing things that get you really excited outside of work too. And that element of, hey, I'm doing this thing next month that I'm really excited about. And I don't think it even has to be terribly expensive things, right?
Mm-mm.
I mean, it can be
No.
something as simple as like, if you love kayaking,
Yep.
getting to go kayak in a unique place, or getting a new kayak. I mean, there's so many ways to look at it, but I think this idea of dreaming is just so absolutely key to being excited about life. And then, just to tie it back, because we are a financial podcast, the money is just a tool, right?
Yep.
And finding ways to create income that then gives you the lifestyle that you want is such a huge part of that. But if you don't know what you want from your life, and it should be evolving and changing, but if you don't have any idea, it's pretty hard to use the money as a tool, right?
Yeah.
I think it was Zig Ziglar that said, you can't hit a target you can't see. And so you have to figure out what that target looks like in order to start building out the framework to make those things happen. It's the difference between living a life of design and living a life of default, right? So if you're living a life of default right now, I think
Right.
the next step is to figure out what your dreams are so you can start designing a life that you're excited about. And Dane, I have to tell you, because for me, this has been huge, just in terms of prioritizing what's important to me, because I work really, really, really hard. And Eric and I were having a conversation last week where I was like, I don't really do anything nice for myself. Like, I'll
Right.
drop money on my kids or on my husband, or, things that make them happy, things that are on their list, that sort of thing. But I don't do it for myself very often. And even just going through and completing that exercise of the dreams list, it's a lot easier to do those things if you know what they are. But
Right.
if you don't know what those things are, it's easy to get in this space of, well, I'm doing all these things for everyone else. Who's doing anything for me? And it's like, well, if you don't,
Yeah.
like, I know what
Resentment.
my kids want. I know what my husband wants. I don't always know what I want. And that's where I think that exercise is so key, because if you don't know, you can't make it happen. So if people want to follow you on Facebook, Instagram, that kind of stuff, where do they find you?
Instagram is probably the one I'm most active on. It's just Dane Espegard, at Dane Espegard. Luckily, I have a unique name.
Yeah.
And then same thing, that's my website as well, and on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate the time that
Yeah.
you've spent
Thank
with
you,
us
Dane.
today. Is there anything that you want to leave our audience with?
Other than, I'd say one thing, which is there's no wrong way to get started with this. So, sometimes people have this, paralysis of like, well, where do I begin? You begin with just making a list, and whether it's a perfect list or not, you're going to change it. So just getting stuff on paper, your mind starts going, even if you don't, get this real structured thing that you heard me talk about that we do with my wife and all this, just by making a list, there's great things that come from that. There's conversations with your significant other. There's, you'll start to ask different questions. So I think just knowing, hey, the first step is the most important one with this whole thing.
Awesome.
That's
If you
awesome.
haven't
Thanks,
read it
Dane.
yet, make sure you buy yourself a copy of The Dream Machine. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you and all of your sage advice on dreaming.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Dane.